Please bear with us for a couple of minutes. We are getting some things set up. We'll start in about 5 minutes. I'll give a 10-minute introduction to Science Forum and thing while you're ready. So while Dr. Ramachandran is getting ready with his presentation, I'll give an introduction to the Varahamira Science Forum, bit to Tamil Heritage Trust and this organization. So this lecture, the venue you are here is Tamil Virtual Academy. Some of you may be coming here for the first time. This is a part of the government of Tamil Nadu, their digital enterprise. This was started off as the Tamil Virtual University and then it became the Tamil Virtual Academy, and it has an enormous number of resources online, videos and texts and all kinds of things that are there for you to learn about the Tamil culture, about the history and the literature and architecture and sculpture and all the heritage of Tamil Nadu. And you can go to their website tamilvu.org and you can see most of those things. That's also a reminder to those of you who still have your cell phones on to please turn them off. I thought I turned it off, but apparently I only turned off the internet. The Tamil Heritage Trust and Varahamira Science Forum, which bring you this program in collaboration, are non-profit volunteer organizations, and we mean volunteer with a very heavy emphasis on volunteer. Tamil Heritage Trust was started several years back, about 10 years back, by Professor Swaminathan here, formerly of IIT Delhi, Badri Seshadri here, and it has a very interesting history because several people who started it, about 5 or 6 people who started it, Mr. Kannan and so on, were actually attending a lecture by Vilainu Ramachandran of all people, and he was talking about a forum for talking about various aspects of Tamil heritage, and that's when they decided that on the spot that they would start the organization, and a couple of months later that it went into implementation. Major program for Tamil Heritage Trust is a series of monthly lectures that happens every first Saturday at 5:30 p.m. That is the first Saturday of every month, 5:30 p.m. Most of our programs are usually in RK Convention Center in Lus. Almost all the videos of most our lectures are available in our blog and on YouTube. So you just have to go search Tamil Heritage Trust and then you'll find it. One of the other programs that we conduct, Tamil Heritage Trust conducts, is what we call an annual site seminar, where we pick a site of heritage, go visit it, but prepare well in advance. Places like Mamallapuram, Ajanta Ellora, Srirangam, Pudukkottai, Bhubaneswar, so on and so forth. We have done 9 tours in the last 9 years. This year in January we are going to places around Bhopal, Sanchi, Vidisha, Devgar, Bhojpuri, and several places like that. And the third program that Tamil Heritage Trust organizes is something called a Pechu Kacheri, and we just had it 2 weeks back. A Pechu Kacheri is literally the talk equivalent of Patu Kacheri, except to give you exposure to heritage, and we had one Pechu Kacheri on the Cholas for 2 days, and you can go find all the videos of these talks on YouTube. We have a Facebook page, Tamil Heritage Trust, and we have a blog, tamilheritage.in. Varaha Mihira Science Forum is kind of like a offshoot of Tamil Heritage Trust in a way. It started off kind of when Professor Sivaramakrishnan here of IIT and I met at a talk. The idea for it sprung there because it was a talk about talk by a scientist in a hotel that which we had a notification via the German Goethe Center, and I was like, why are there more notifications of this? And then a couple of other friends here, Rajagopalan, Mr. Mohan, and a couple of others, we came together and we decided to start this because we are not getting any information. We started off as a WhatsApp group, then we started off as a monthly lecture program, and we've been doing monthly lectures since last September, that is last August, that is August 2017. Our previous lecture was last month. Dr. Uttara Dhararajan spoke here. We are happy to see such a very large crowd. This is entirely a volunteer organization. Unlike Tamil Heritage Trust, is actually registered. We are simply a WhatsApp and Facebook group right now. Most of our lectures, we have a YouTube channel, the Varaha Mihira Science Forum channel. The primary reason, and I'll tell a little more in detail about it, the primary reason we started this is because there don't seem to be too many fora where the general public can get an understanding of science and math. We have forums like the IIT, Anna University is there, the medical colleges are there. You have professional organizations like engineering organizations and math science and all these computer companies. They're all organizing programs. They all tend to be technical seminars and very targeted at specialists. And there aren't many. They do occasionally conduct lectures that try to take science to the general public. Tamil Nadu Science Forum and some of its members are here is one such organization that travels around and does it. But we want something that's much more regular, and that's kind of what was the motivation for this. So we've had monthly lectures, and we usually have it on the 4th Saturday of every month. This one we are having on the 5th Saturday because he was not available last Saturday. And we have a WhatsApp group. You can, I think there's a book going around. You can sign up, give us your email. You can, check out we don't have a blog yet, but there is a Facebook page for Varaha Mihira Science Forum. And this is not really such a new idea. As Professor Krishnaswamy Alladi, who happens to be his cousin, who gave us a lecture last December about the foundation of math science, explained this kind of popular lecture or even a scientific lecture is something that started off 100 years back when people like C.V. Raman and others were doing things, conducting research. They had open lectures here. The Alladi family itself hosted several lectures by Nobel-winning scientists like Murray Gell-Mann and Niels Bohr famously, and others had shown up. And in fact, from that special series of physics seminars, math science was born, or so Professor Alladi explained last year. And there's not the only ones. The math science has recently started something called Science at the Sabha. They've had it for a couple of years. There is a Brahmagupta colloquium at the IIT. There is, K.V. Sharma Library conducts, some astronomy workshops. Different organizations do these things, but they have not, sustained over time. They are not generally continued for long, and we kind of wanted to change that. The second thing was, we didn't always want professionals talking to professionals. We wanted to encourage something, and this is something we learned from Professor Swaminathan. When a professional addresses a gathering of other professionals, there is a basic level of assumption at which the common man, finds it very difficult to even enter it. And it isn't, and not by common man, I'm not necessarily talking about the auto driver and the bus conductor and the, laundry person. I'm talking even somebody who's, formally employed, has a college education. They don't, with that background, necessarily feel comfortable with the kind of sophisticated lectures that, professional scientists organize. The advantage that an amateur has is that they've fumbled around with the subject at an adult age. So they've, they know some of the difficulties that you undergo, and they don't necessarily make the same assumptions that experienced speakers or professionals in the field make about the subject. So that's one of the motivations for this kind of thing. And so Professor Ramachandran, I don't think he requires any introduction. I think from the size of the hall, I think his reputation precedes him. We've just like doubled the size of our usual audience. But formally, he's a professor in the University of California. His book, Phantoms in the, he's one of the world's leading neurosurgeons. His book, Phantoms in the Brain, of course, is very, very famous. He has given TED Talks, he's given Reith lectures, he's won the Padma Bhushan. We gave you a whole qualification list in the email, and I won't list all of them here. So I have the stage for 5 more minutes, I think, while he's still preparing. So let me explain a couple of other things that we want to do, and if you're interested, you can help us around. So some of the other activities we want to do is to not just keep this as lectures. Science should be activity. So we want experiments, people's public access to experiments. There are things like sidewalk astronomy. There is a very amateur group that actually takes a small telescope, puts it on a sidewalk, invites people, and asks them to just look at the minor planets, not necessarily quasars and distant galaxies. But most people haven't even seen Jupiter or Saturn via the telescope. The Birla Planetarium does that every second Saturday. That's not very, most people don't know that. So that kind of thing, we want to do that. We conducted a couple of summer camps last year. Siddharth Chandrasekhar is over here, who's given a lecture on Newton and his book, The Principia. Stand up, Siddharth, and wave to the public. Yeah, you can applaud loudly. He's getting married shortly. So if you speak in Varahmira Science Forum and you're very young, you could get married also. So he gave a series of a couple of two-day program. He gave a demonstration of very simple experiments that some of you may have seen Dr. Arvind Gupta famously do with his Arvind Gupta toys. And Arvind Gupta, incidentally, was a speaker a couple of months back. And simple experiments, things like, a straw that you cut off and show the different air columns and the variation in pitch, bending water pouring out of a bottle and you point a laser at it to show the laser tracing through that. Very simple experiments that kids can do, lighting an electric bulb with using, just powering it with a lemon or a potato or something like that. This kind of things that are, fascinating kind of things. And I gave a 5-day workshop on Indian mathematics and astronomy. We talk about astronomy almost as though it only started with the telescope. And as mathematics, the only names you hear are all Western mathematicians, Archimedes or Gauss or Euler, Newton, Laplace, those names, Bernoulli, those names. But we had very famous mathematicians, including the one who gave us our name, Varahamihira, of course, Aryabhatta, Bhaskara, Brahmagupta, Madhava, people who have contributed tremendously. And I wanted to kind of communicate the heritage of mathematics and astronomy that they developed. What are their contributions? How did astronomy function before the telescope was invented? What was the, how did mathematics develop from the intensity of the astronomy? So those are the things other things that we did. We'll plan to have a couple of heritage walks and things like that, not entirely focusing on science. We'll probably, this city is gave birth to a couple of Nobel Prize winners and several very reputed scientists. So probably since not just Carnatic musicians and film stars. So we may do a heritage walk of these scientists and their contributions. We would like to go to one of our friends and potential future speakers. He will be speaking in the near future. Mr. K.V. Balasubramaniam is a meteorologist at the regional med center, and he would, he's offered to give interested people a tour of the meteorology department, what they do, how they record observations, and give an introduction. So, not just, lectures confined to this kind of place, but actually go out there and physically, engage with nature, with science, and so on. So, I'm a little out, and since I can't sing, and that's a good thing, I'll stop and we'll catch our breath and wait for Dr. Ramachandran to start. This is our 17th lecture. Ready, yeah?
Yeah. Continue.
We have heard enough. Do please fill out the book that goes out with your email addresses and all. And I think, come on. I think a couple of gentlemen have translated his books into Tamil, and they want to present him with the.
I'd love to receive a copy.
Come on to the center. Sir.
Dear friends, my name is Rajan. I am from Bharati Puttakalayam, also belongs to the Tamil Nadu Science Forum. Dr. Ramachandran is kind enough to give us permission to translate two of his books. One which went in the name of Emerging Mind, which has been translated as Urvaham Ullam in Tamil. It was published 3 years back. Now it is running a second or third reprint. And there is another book called Telltale Brain, which we have translated as Vazhigooru Moolai. Now this is going for the second printout. I'm happy to hand over some of the copies to Dr. Ramachandran, and you can have these copies from Bharati Puttakalayam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Long back to you.
You want to go to the center so they can take a picture of you? Free moves.
We got the permission through Dr. Ramachandran.
Okay. Thank you.
This is for you. I will keep it there.
Just 2 minutes. They're bringing. Just 1 second.
We're still waiting for the microphone, and meanwhile I can just use my voice, natural voice, and some of you may hear what I'm saying. And it's going to be a slightly unorthodox lecture. Usually I just talk about science and neurology and what I do research on. Today I'm going to sprinkle the lecture with some anecdotes from the history of science and some of my own research, the way science is done in real life. And so that's what Gopa suggested that. So I'm going to do that, mainly talk about history of science, neuroscience especially, very idiosyncratic, highly specific lecture on doing science. But then we'll also talk about some current research we're doing in our lab, which may be more interesting to some of you. But they're both interesting, but we'll see.
The slide changer is here.
Thank you. So you're going to, okay.
He's bringing it.
Okay, that's fine. No hurry, yeah. What's that?
Till then you can use this one.
Yeah, till then I'll use this. Okay, good. Am I audible at the back? Okay, good. Yeah, there's just some colleagues who are involved in the particular research that I was going to talk to you about today. There are many other colleagues, but these are people who are students in my lab who are working on body image, disturbances in body image, phantom limbs, and those topics. And some of them are postdocs, grad student Paul McGeer, whose picture you see on the right. He made the slide, as you can see. Okay, so I've given this talk before in Madras, in Chennai. Last year, for example, at 2-3 different venues at IIT, Medical School, Stanley Medical College. So I'll talk about something slightly different today, and namely how you go about doing science. Now, there are a lot of misconceptions about science. For example, about skepticism. To be a scientist, you have to be very skeptical right off the bat. And this is true, but only half true. You have to know the whole story. What do you mean by skeptical? And to what extent? And what are you going to be skeptical of? Then there's a whole question of creativity in science. topic about which nobody knows anything, including me. Right? So the creativity and simplicity. But there are certain heuristics, some rules of thumb that people have used in the past. I watched scientists at work, some very eminent scientists. This is my little bits of wisdom, nuggets of wisdom gathered from having watched these individuals work. What's special about them? What special magic allowed Crick to make 2 great discoveries in his lifetime, not just one? So you can't say it's just luck. You can't be lucky twice. You can be lucky once, but not twice. So what's going on in the brains of these people who make extraordinary discoveries in science? One cynical view is it's an old boys network. You know, Nobel Prize winners nominate other Nobel Prize winners from their own friends or from their not the children, but their students. All this nepotism and all this going on. Therefore, there's just this very cynical view of scientific, you know, the whole hierarchy in science. And there's some truth to this, but not really. I mean, if you've been in the business long enough, you say that it contaminates the process, but it's not the key. It's not the soul of the process of discovery, right? So what's going on here? Why are some people very good at this, and they seem to make discoveries time and again? Often the same guy makes multiple discoveries, so it's probably not luck. What's going on in this field? So one of the things you notice is that it runs in families. If you look at the people who made great discoveries, all Nobel laureates, let's consider Nobel laureates, and look at family trees of Nobel laureates. They're not genetic family trees, but Guru Shishya, Parampara. You find that many instances where there are lineages of famous discoveries being made by students and grandstudents and grand-grandstudents, and people have made trees of this. You can go and look it up on the internet. They're already telling you something, that sometimes this style, the heuristics of making great discoveries, can be learned, provided you're smart enough to begin with. That's why I put IQ on the top. You do need to be intelligent. I mean, you don't have to be superhuman intelligent, but you know, they're people just like us. They have to be smart first thing, but that's not enough. You know, every I know 100 people who are intelligent, not maybe one of them is a Nobel laureate, you know. So there's some other ingredient that we are looking for. What is that ingredient? As a person studying the human brain, one of the questions that comes up at meetings like this, somebody will get up and say, you explain phantom limbs and all this stuff, it's very interesting, but what about human creativity? Can you explain that? What about belief in God? What about poetry? And the answer is we can't explain that, but we're trying, right? So high IQ is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Many high IQ people don't do anything. So it's what you do with your intelligence is important. The question is, what do you do with it? The other thing I've noticed very clearly is inspiration, that being around inspired people, great scientists, to use a cliche, being around geniuses inspires you to reach for the stars. Stay away from naysayers. There's a Tamil name for this, right? What do you call for a naysayer? Tamil name? I forgot my Tamil a long time ago. Aman Jami, opposite of Aman Jami. Huh? Illa Sami or something like that. So, Topan Jami. Topan Jami. Anyway, there's a word which I've forgotten. I'm glad you've forgotten too. So it's about the person who constantly frowns on any new idea. You know, they're practicing intellectual abortion. Don't let the idea evolve and play with it. You have to play with the idea a little bit before you start getting insights, and then have 20 crazy ideas in a week or 10 days. If one idea matures and turns out to be a discovery, then you've made an important discovery every 2 weeks. Groucho Marx used to say this about something else, which I won't tell you about, but maybe I will later. Okay. But the scientific discovery is like playing the stock market. You know, you do some safe experiments, which is not very important, but you're sure of the result. Bread and butter science. Then you do some engage in highly speculative adventures into new realms of discovery, where the chances of success are low, but the payoff is very high. Just like playing the stock market, no difference. But you do it with scientific discovery. So inspiration comes from other scientists, then cross-fertilization of ideas. This is very important. Everything I've been telling you so far is common sense, but it's very difficult to put in practice. You all know it, but it's hard to practice. Cross-fertilization of ideas is, you're doing your PhD on botany, on mitochondria in corn plants or something, to pick some obscure subject, right? Don't keep reading that and reading all the books. I'm doing a literature search. Read something else from some other discipline. That's where the discoveries come from, this cross-fertilization. Classic example of DNA, double helix. The greatest discovery in biology was not made by a biologist or some from bird watching or shell collecting or dissecting frogs. It came from a radar physicist. Radar physicist, Francis Crick was a radar physicist till the age of 28, 29. Then he decided to go into biology. Didn't get his PhD for 4 or 5 years. He was in the early 30s before he got his PhD because people thought he was a bit crazy, erratic, and very smart, but going off in tangents all the time and not paying adequate attention to detail. So there's a famous example of Francis Crick, who was my colleague at UCSD, by the way, until he died. Famous anecdote of where Watson and Crick went to dinner at Cambridge, and Chargaff. Many of you here are biochemists or molecular biologists. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. Chargaff has dinner with them, and these guys are asking about the nucleotide pairs. They said, so finally Chargaff got impatient. That's the world's greatest discovery on nucleotides at that time. So he got impatient. What are you two guys doing? What are you up to? They said, we're trying to discover the secret of life. We want to know how the DNA molecule creates. So we want to know how the different base pairs click together to create the DNA molecule. He said, don't waste your time. Then he said, we live in an age when pygmies are aspiring to be scientists. This is not the right thing to do. You have to go read about, you don't even know. Tell me what is the formula, chemical formula of adenine. He asked Crick, tell me the chemical formula of adenine. He didn't know. Coming from radar physicist. So then you want to do experiments on biology and discover the structure of DNA. You don't even know the basics. But thank God Crick was not scared off by Chargaff. He went to the shed in Cambridge. You can still see the shed in Cavendish. Sat with bits of cardboard and wire. Remember, I want you to all take home message of this talk. Crick and Watson sat there with bits of wire, paper, and rubber. Looked at X-ray crystallography, which at that time people couldn't interpret because it had this helical shape. They figured there's only one way you could make a helix, by having complementary pairs. So the complementarity of the molecule became obvious. It fit the pattern of X-ray diffraction photographs. In a flash of insight, they saw the structure must be helical. But they did not stop there. That's very important. They did not stop by saying that it's a helical molecule. They took the next step saying, so what? They saw the significance of it. Other people had seen a helix, something like a helix, including Rosalind Franklin. But the big step was the complementarity of the helix dictates the functional complementarity of heredity. They saw the analogy. Much of science consists of grasping analogies. Analogy between the structural logic of the DNA molecule, the complementarity of the two helices, and the functional logic of heredity. A pig resembling a pig. Any child wonders why does a pig give birth to a pig? Why does a pig not give birth to a human being? You're looking at me like I'm crazy. Perfectly legitimate question. The child is capable of, only the child, an innocent child who has not been brainwashed, asking the question, Dad, why is it that pigs never give birth to donkeys? It turns out the answer is very profound, the question is very profound, and Crick and Watson gave you the answer. Almost most of the answer, right? So I'm going to give you several examples from Crick's own voice, quotations from his research about the heuristics of discovery. The other thing, for example, is the notion of simplicity and elegance. So, okay, take-home message there is, when you go home, if you're doing a PhD in plant biophysics or something like that, go and read Erwin Schrödinger's book on what is life. Or go read something completely unrelated to absorb the style of thinking, what we call style of thinking of people who are successful in science. In addition to reading your book, of course, your textbooks and your papers and your publications and your research papers and all that, you have to do that. But people shouldn't stay confined in a cul-de-sac. Staying confined in a cul-de-sac is the greatest enemy of science, of discovery. You stay in a cul-de-sac and you get pats on the back for this. You get rewarded for this. The system is organized so that they come and punish the visionary and reward the sycophant. If you say, you nod your head and you go along with him, then you get, my God, nature sent me this paper to review. I must be important. My God, they gave me this such and such a prize, so I must be very important. In that circle, you're important, but you don't see the big picture. And it is unfortunate that these small rewards exist because they mislead you into thinking you're making progress. So Crick used to say, when you've got a finite lifetime, pay attention to important problems. Don't work on unimportant problems, however seductive they may be, intellectually. That's not the point. The point is it's important if it's true. So somebody's working on something because intellectually it's exciting, stimulating, grabs your attention, but then you have to ask, if I prove this, so what? Then suddenly it hits you like a hammer. You say, my God, it doesn't matter if I discover this, yes or no. Right? There's no consequence. Why am I doing it? It becomes a matter of habit. So you avoid habits, avoid all your friends, avoid the opinions of all your teachers. Start from axiomatic first principles and ask, if I show this, is it important or not important? And that's very hard to do, believe me, because we're all social creatures. So you believe and accept what people tell you. So if they tell you you're doing good, then you say, okay, I must be doing good, right? And inspiration, cross-fertilization. Yeah, cross-fertilization I already told you about. The need to read widely. Crick, going back to Crick, I hope I'm using Crick as an example because most people know about the double helix. It's the secret of life. The helical structure of the molecule and the complementarity of the strands explains heredity and all of that. So it's the most important discovery in biology, in all of biology in this century, perhaps in all of history. So I'm going to be deliberately using that as an example. Crick's discovery of the genetic code. And the prelude to that was the discovery of the double helix. Okay, so he read, the young Francis Crick, when he was a radar physicist in London, read a book by Erwin Schrödinger, another theoretical physicist, nothing to do with biology. Schrödinger said, this is utterly mysterious why pigs give birth to pigs. After all, it's a sperm and an egg. Something in the sperm is doing this, or the egg must be doing this. And people are homed in on a molecule. It must be a molecule of some kind. Obviously, there's nothing else in the body except molecules. So what is this molecule doing? There must be some sort of process by which it's a repeating code. Like you use a small set of code symbols to create an infinite vocabulary. That's the critical part he saw. So it must be a repeating molecule. Critical phrase in his book. There is a repeating molecule in the chromosome which quasi-repetitive characteristics which may explain heredity, the resemblance of offspring into parent. Crick read this and it stuck in his head. Then he saw the DNA molecule, the structure of the DNA molecule. In a flash of insight, he saw that this explains heredity, or might explain heredity. Biology was born at that moment. When he read Schrödinger, physicist's book.
Can you put this
Oh, you want me to put that? Okay, I think it's better.
easier for
Okay, suddenly I'm loud, but probably more audible at the back. If I go too fast, just interrupt me. We want to keep it informal, so just interrupt me if I'm going too fast, okay? So here is a physicist, famous theoretical physicist who got a Nobel Prize, Austrian, and he wrote a popular book on biology. The importance of reading popular books. By the way, don't frown on popular books. The other day, somebody in Delhi, a close friend of mine, brilliant man, was telling me, where did you buy that book? It's about some obscure topic on Indology or something like that. And then I bought the book and he said, don't buy the book, that guy's an idiot, the author. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But it's well written, but he doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, a lot of mistakes there. I said, sometimes I buy books that are bad, because the mistakes often lead you to the truth. By observing where he has gone wrong, leads you to the truth. It's not it's a quote from Sherlock Holmes, actually, telling Watson that he reads his books in order to know what's not the truth, and leads him to the correct answer. Okay, so cross-fertilization of ideas, simplicity and elegance. This is a very important criterion. A lot of people, I find, 98% of people are convinced that good science requires high-tech, complicated equations, extraordinarily sophisticated equipment, technology. Sometimes it's true, but not always. In fact, the very opposite is true. You nearly get lost in the technical aspects of science and miss the soul and spirit of science and miss making an important discovery. I always tell my students, if you're trying to do an experiment, what is the simplest experiment you can do to answer that question? I'll give you 2 or 3 examples from my own research, but also from earlier research. Let's take physics. Everybody here knows physics. You're taking physics in high school. Our schools are excellent, by the way, compared to Europe and America. High schools especially are very good. So let's take a simple experiment of what did Faraday do? What's his most famous experiment? Michael Faraday. Okay, everybody thought he discovered electromagnetic induction. Oh, you need to switch off, man. No?
The mic is too close to you, so it's booming in something.
Okay.
Is that better?
Is that better? All right.
Sorry.
I'm still jet-lagged, having flown in from the U.S. for some reason, but anyway, we'll see how it goes. So, in terms of simplicity and elegance, everyone knows that Faraday discovered electromagnetic induction. Till then, electricity was one force in physics, the current and all that, and magnetism was completely unrelated. There's certain stones called lodestones, which you tie in a thread will always point north. Sailors discovered it, nothing to do with physics. He wondered, might magnetism have something to do with electricity? Is there any connection? Why should there be any connection? There's no theoretical reason. He just had a hunch. He said, why not? Right? So he said, let me find out. Then all he did was he had a copper wire. He took a lodestone and a magnet, and he moved it to and fro in the wire. And what happens? Just a piece of wire, and you move a magnet in its vicinity. What happens? You get a current. Now that's a miracle. Just think about it. In that experiment, he united two fields of physics, two unrelated fields, magnetism and electricity. He had linked for the first time. Then he started writing about magnetic fields, which nobody had ever seen. Some physicists laughed at him. He said, already experiments are very clever, but what do you mean the magnetic field? Some mysticism, some bullshit nonsense. What is a field, you know? There's no mathematical description, no formal description. It's very primitive, just simple experiment, and you're jumping to conclusions. Then he demonstrated the existence of fields. How did he do that? Sorry? That's right. You can't get simpler than that. You put a magnet on a sheet of paper, sprinkle iron filings, you better see the fields. Forget about equations, you see it. He rendered it visible to your eye. You can't get simpler than that. That's an example of what I mean by elegant experiment by Michael Faraday. He's done dozens of other things which I don't have time to go into. What about Newton? Everybody knows about Newton's wavelength theory of light and all that. How about another famous experiment of Newton? You know about his experiment that all the white light is made up of 7 colors. Even though it looks white, made up of 7 different colors. It's counterintuitive. Why did he know that? Because people think he passed light through a prism, and he discovered that. Not true. People had passing light through prisms long before Newton. That's why chandeliers were invented. Prisms put color, when you put white light, produces colorful displays. But they didn't know why, and they didn't ask why. They're not doing it. Most people are not curious. Let's face it. Am I still audible? Oh no, that's just the late pointer. It's okay. So the question is, why were people were not receptive to this idea at all? They were all skeptical. They said, what do you mean white? How can colors produce white? Seems counterintuitive. It should be more muddy and more colorful. Right? It should be some muddy color. Why do you get white when you mix colors? It doesn't make any sense. Then he took the prism from the chandelier, put it up, had a hole in the window, and showed that it had 7 colors. I said showed, but 90% of people still did not believe him, because it violated common sense. How can colors be produce white? Doesn't make any sense. Then they said, aha, Newton is using these bad prisms which had flaws in them, dust particles and other flaws, some optical deficit. That's what's causing these colors. So the Newton supporters went and said, let's purify the glass, make it more pure and no flaws. Still the colors are being produced. So they said, see, it's nothing to do with the flaws. The opponent said, no, you're not purified it enough. There's still some flaws there. Problem is this approach is never ending. However much you purify it, there's impurities in it. This went on for 20 years, by the way. The battle between Newtonian supporters and the ones opposing about this colors, wavelength of light. Newton looked at it in the morning and said, why are they wasting their time on this? It takes 5 minutes. He put a second prism. The colors combine into white again. He said, if it produces impurity, it should become even more colorful. Why is it becoming white? This is called Newtonian experiment of experimentum crucis. Crucial experiment for that conclusion. So all his colleagues were spending months and months grinding prisms and purifying glass. He took 5 minutes to do the experiment, show that he was right. Another example of his brilliance is, less well-known example is the velocity of sound. People did not know what the velocity of sound was before. In fact, people thought it was instantaneous. Until somebody said, you get lightning and thunder, you know about lightning and thunder. The light arrives first, thunder comes, so it must be taking finite time. But how much time? How do you measure the speed of something coming from a thunder? You don't know how far it is. How did he measure the speed of velocity of sound? He did it actually in right next to the room I was living in Cambridge as a student. Very simple. There's a long hall called Neville's Hall. You get the clap, 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 clap with a delay. The long corridor. At that time, clocks were just beginning to be discovered. They had mechanical clocks, they're crude, but they worked. Or sometimes you can use your pulse to time it. You started clapping until it became synchronous. Once it became synchronous, he started measuring the time of the stopwatch, about 100 claps, to synchronize them, what the distance is, number of claps is, what do you get? You get the velocity of sound. This is what I call a simple experiment. There are people going up to mountains and putting fires in this and that to see if you get to measure the velocity of sound. He spent 5 minutes of his life and did this important discovery. There are hundreds of stories like this in the history of science. It's important to read them because it tells you, it plants an important seed in your mind. It happened to me. Namely, science is about elegance and simplicity in experimental design, not about doing complicated. In fact, people go so far as to say, I've told people I've discovered that this brain gets reorganized, but if you touch the guy's face, he feels it in his hand, a phantom. I'll tell you about it in a minute. Then they say, but have you done brain imaging? I said, well, I don't need to. I've shown it, but that only takes a couple of days to do that. I said, yeah, that's the point. Some people think that the more complicated you experiment, the more important the discovery. There's no correlation. Believe me, it's the other way around, right? So another example is, so now let me move on to, I'm giving you only about half a dozen heuristics that you can import into your own style of doing research. But mind you, this is not for everybody. Each person develops his or her own style. Some people are more meticulous, careful, and do wonderful experiments, very elegant, in a narrow domain. Others are always going off on tangents, coming up with half-baked ideas. Most of them turn out to be wrong, but one very important discovery. Up to each person. But these are just general heuristics that you should, pitfalls to avoid. Avoid getting into a cul-de-sac, another pitfall. Avoid being seduced by taps in the back, pats in the back by your colleagues, another pitfall. You're smart enough to know whether it's important or not. You don't need your colleague's justification, right? Then there are, okay, I think we've had enough of this general science stuff. I'm going to dive into my own research, tell you about two topics, phantom limbs and construction of calendars in the brain. And another topic with mirror neurons, which everybody's interested in, what they're not doing and what they might be doing. Let's take examples of this kind of research we do. And the kind of experiment Newton did with what we call the crucial experiment to rule out artifacts that the patient's going crazy and you're just making these deductions with no basis to them, right? Girl wanders into my lab, young lady wanders into my lab, she happens to be a student of mine, and she said, Dr. Ramachandran, I want to tell you something. I have this very strange symptom. Now it's got to a point where anybody has very strange symptoms, most of the United States, in the end they come to me. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. So this lady says, I said, what's the problem? She said, no, it's not a problem, I just wanted to share it with you. I said, what is it? I want you to touch your own elbow. I felt it in my elbow. Hit your head like this. I did this. Oh, I feel it in my head. Bop, 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 bop. When I watch some other person doing something, performing an action, or being touched by somebody else, or hit, or tapped, I feel that sensation in precise synchrony on my body, almost like voodoo. Now, this has been noticed before casually, but nobody has studied it. In fact, nobody even knew about it. Most people don't know about it. And I said, what's going on here? Why would anybody feel, if you start feeling my touch, this is bizarre, right? But I'll tell you the solution to this in a minute. Second example I'm going to tell you about is where a person, when I ask you to say, what did you do in February this year? February, what did you do this February?
I listened to a concert.
Oh, you organized a concert. Excellent. Now, if I ask you to visualize a calendar in front of your eyes, what does it look like?
Rows and columns.
Rows and columns, okay. That's typical. 98% of people say this. But 2% of people say it's an oval, like a hula hoop, like an egg. Horizontal hula hoop on my chest. It's an L shape, coming January, February, March, July, suddenly August, September, October, November go off in the distance. People have labeled these people as schizophrenics. They've been diagnosed as schizophrenics by some physicians. It's unfortunate, nothing wrong with them. Otherwise, right? L shape. Or you ask them, what about, what else? Give me another example. I see a U shape like this, January, February, March, July, August, September, October, December. First hint that they're not making it up is it runs in families. Phenomenon runs in families. Secondly, they say, I can see it. I said, are you sure? I can see it. I can see it actually like this, like this, like this. And it's got a font. It's Arial font. So it's different for different subjects. I can see it printed there. And tell you the size and the spacing. January, February. It's actually printed there in front of me. I said, so it's like when you imagine, when you think of Cinderella, you think of a pumpkin. Automatically imagine a pumpkin. No, because here I can't help seeing it. When you think of Cinderella, you can think of mice, you can think of Prince Charming, you can think of glass slippers. You don't have to think of a pumpkin. Here, when you send me the calendar, this is the only way I can visualize the calendar. And it feels like it's actually written there and it's in front of me. First question that arises in people's minds is, how do you know she's not making it up? This is always a question in our business. If you're doing psychiatry, neurology, any area pertaining to human behavior, first question is, how do you know? Because you don't waste time, year of your time studying a bogus phenomenon. Many bogus disorders in our field, I can tell you that. I'll give you some examples in a minute. So let's go back to the first one, the interpersonal synesthesia. When I touch Dr. Subramaniam and you touch Swaminathan, he feels, if I'm the person with the syndrome, somebody touches you, I feel it in my elbow or in my wrist. Why would you feel that? Well, years prior to that, first of all, before I do research on it, I want to make sure she was not lying. Now you can do brain imaging. You can spend 6 months on this and about $40,000 to $50,000 and get a result where you're only 90% sure, given the inherent noise in the process of acquiring the images. Or you can take 5 minutes into it. Which would you prefer? Obviously it's 5 minutes, right? Okay. So how do I find out that Dr. Swaminathan is not lying to me? He's got this phenomenon. He's telling me, Rama, I mean, I can actually see this calendar in front of me. No, I'm sorry, the other one. Jumping ahead of myself. That I feel that when you touch yourself, I feel it in my hand. So we did an old clinical procedure, which is called avoidance, blink avoidance response. Student was sitting next to me, and I did this to my student, towards her eyes. Student shut her eyes and withdrew her head. Normal reaction. It's a normal protective reflex from the threat. If I approach, I already told you now, but if I haven't done that, if I approach your face like this, you do that and move back. If I approach your stomach, you don't do that. You do this. You have the blink reflex, avoidance reflex. So she was watching this girl, and I did this to my student. She winced. Not a startled reflex, an actual avoidance reflex. But I'm threatening this girl, not her. No normal person, if I do this to my friend here, and all of you are not going to do that. Doesn't happen. In 10 seconds, you've shown this is a real phenomenon. She's not making it up. Unless she's so smart that she wants to claim specific intention of deceiving me, which is very unlikely. Experiment number one. Experiment number two is even simpler. I said, okay, if I touch myself, you feel the touch. What if I scratch like this? Do you feel that? Yeah, I feel that too. I'm going to put my finger in boiling water. Do you feel the heat? I've never tried that, but I wouldn't recommend it. I said, no, it's okay, don't worry. I'm going to just briefly dip my finger in hot water. So I had a jar of boiling water. It was not actually boiling, it was cold, it was what do you call it, frozen carbon dioxide, dry ice. So steam was coming out, some bubbles. She thought it was boiling water. I said, I'm going to put my finger in it. I want you to tell me what you feel that. Are you with me so far? Okay, so she experiences touch sensations. What about heat? Oh, that's what I did. She said, oh, you know, she said, that's very funny because I felt the plunge of the finger in the water, the wetness, but no heat. I'll explain this in a minute. If she were making it up, why would she selectively making it up only for the touch and not for the heat? Already it's telling me something to do with brain pathways. But you have to prove that. We'll get to that in a minute. One more minute, right? But clinching observation, then I said, okay, now what did you feel? She said, well, I just felt the wetness and then the, notice what she was doing. Okay, and then you go under the table and then there's a paper napkin lying in the vicinity and she wipes it. That gives you more information than 6 months of brain imaging. Reaching for the napkin. You're with me so far? Okay. So this is a very important lesson to learn, that the importance of a discovery or the importance of an observation has no correlation with the sophistication of the technique that goes into proving your point. In fact, more complicated the technique, the longer the distance between the raw data and the finished conclusion, the more opportunity for massaging the data, either consciously or unconsciously. The beauty of the experiments I'm talking about is it's directly in your face. You give no opportunity to massage the data. That's very important in neurology and neuroscience. Now, you have to be very careful because there are a lot of bogus syndromes. I'll get back to these two syndromes in a minute. You're all wondering why this happens and who cares, right? We have three agendas in the lab. One is what is the observation? What is this patient complaining of? Is it real? Is she making it up? Secondly, what is the mechanism? If it is real, she's not making it up, what's the mechanism in the brain? Third, who cares? All three have to be fulfilled. And can you help the patient? Fourth, let's not forget that. Okay, so all of these four criteria need to be fulfilled for any discovery to make it, we call it the breakthrough, okay? So now let's go back to bogus diseases. To give you an example, Duclarenbolt syndrome. How many know about Duclarenbolt syndrome? Raise your hands. It's in DSM, the latest DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the Bible for all such psychologists and therapists. If you diagnose somebody with a disorder described in that Bible, you can bill the patient and the insurance company. If it's not in that book, then you can't do that. So there are committees held, meetings held every 3 years to revise and update this book. Duclarenbolt syndrome refers to the following. It's a delusion developed by a young woman that an old, rich, famous guy is madly in love with her, but is in denial about it. I'm not making this up, but that is officially recognized disease. The converse of this disease, where an aging, rich, famous gentleman develops a delusion that this young hottie is in love with him, but is in denial about it, is much more common, but is not described in the book. And this is because most psychiatrists are men, and probably, my hunch. The second disease I'll tell you is even more funny. It's called chronic underachievement disorder. In my day, it used to be called stupidity. Again, this is bogus disorder. There's no such disorder, chronic underachievement disorder. The third one is the best one of all. It's called opponent defiant disorder. ODD, opponent defiant disorder, diagnosed frequently. Refers to a spirited youngster who dares to challenge the authority and diagnosis of the psychiatrist or the authority of his parent figure or some teacher or professor or the physician, and dares to contradict them or accept their diagnosis, right? Now the beauty of this diagnosis, the man who invented this disease is genius. Any attempt by the patient to disprove the disorder, protest the disorder, can be construed as additional evidence for the diagnosis. So you have a no-win situation, right? So I think the most interesting of the three disorders is completely fake. There's no such, don't take it from me, okay? Now the question is, when you come across a disease like the one I'm talking about, the touch sensations being referred, same three questions: is it real or not? What is the mechanism of the brain? Can it be clinically useful? Can you treat the patient? Let's do that with each of those disorders. Let's talk about the, but first let me begin with the, okay, let's talk about phantom limbs first. I don't know what we're doing for time here, but. Okay, so one of the things we studied over the last 20 years is phantom limbs. You remove a patient's arm, you lose an arm in a car accident, and then even though the arm is gone, continues to vividly feel the presence of the missing arm attached to the stump. The phantom will move, say goodbye, pat his brother on the shoulder, reach out and shake hands with you. He's not delusional, he knows it's not real, but subjectively it's a very compelling sensation. Clinically important because 90% of these patients have excruciating pain in the phantom. Unbearable pain. Often the phantom is clenched and it's like this, like nails digging into the phantom palm. Ow! For minutes, hours. You can't do anything to open the clenched phantom. So I'm not going to go into details. We did several experiments on this. First of all, what's going on in the brain when you amputate? We were the first to study this in a human being. When you do that, there's a map of the body on the surface of the brain in the post-central gyrus. This is kind of fun, actually. I mean, some new discovery I'll tell you about. Okay, so these points, number one, that brown strip there behind the central sulcus, Rolandic sulcus, that furrow there, has a complete map of the body surface and surface of the brain. You can see the map, oops, that's a map there, right? Toes, hands, fingers, face. Notice a couple of peculiar features. The hand, the head, instead of being near the neck, is dislocated and below the hand. Can you all see that? Maybe people at the back. It's a continuous map: foot, thigh, torso, hand, and then face, rather than face and then hand, and then lower jaw, and then internal viscera and all that. Okay, just keep that in mind. It's important. Now we then did the experiment where we recorded from. So we had this chap sitting in the clinic, and I simply touched different parts of his body and asked him, "What do you see?" Basic first-year medical student, what they learn, sensory exam. You know, just have him sitting blindfolded on a chair, and touch him with a Q-tip, different parts of his body, and ask him, "What do you feel and where?" My lower jaw on the left side, rubber cotton bud. That's my chest. That's my chest again. That's my arm. My left arm is amputated above the elbow. How about here? That's just my belly. That's my chest. Oh my God! You know, that feels like I can feel it on my thumb, my phantom thumb. Do it again. I feel it on my phantom thumb. I feel the rubbing. How about here? That's my phantom index finger. That's my phantom pinky. You see what I mean? I amputated his left arm above the elbow about a week ago. And I touched his face, and he feels the sensation in the phantom arm, phantom hand, in addition to the skin on the face. And you can draw a map. Maybe I didn't bring one with me. There's a map. Thumb, index finger, all drawn with a felt pen. You can see with high-tech science here. The thumb, lip, pinky, ball of the thumb, clearly delineated from each other on the face. And you can take a drop of water, hot water, and put it on the face. You know what happens? The question is only touch refer to what about heat? The answer is, he says, "Oh, my thumb feels hot." Ice cube. My pinky feels ice cold, depending on where you put it. It feels ice cold, in addition to the touch. Pain with the needle. I feel the indentation in the skin, but no pain in the phantom. So some things get remapped, other things don't get remapped. It's not clear why. This much is known. So these are all new observations. Not you heard this before in TED lectures and all that, last 10 years, but I'm going to give it a new twist. I went to a lecture in Stanford, and the chap was listening to me, and it occurred to me, something very strange occurred to me, which I discussed with my students. My theory is what's going on here is, if you look at that map, you already seen this map, continuous map of the body surface and the body brain, right? The hand representation is over there, right? And I'm going to a little bit of detail here. And look at where the face representation is here, but what's nearest to the hand? So the claim is the arm is amputated, the skin of the face, the sensations can normally come to the face, invade the vacated territory corresponding to the missing hand. Is that clear? You amputated the arm, the sensations from the face skin, which normally go only to the face area of the brain, cross innervate the area of cortex, the patch of cortex that is deprived of sensations, the hand area. The hand area is deprived of sensation because the amputation is asking for more new input. So the face input normally comes only to the face, invades the territory, and starts activating those hand neurons. That's why when you touch the face, it activates not only face neurons, it cross-activates the hand neurons, and whatever is reading the signals higher up in the brain misinterprets the signals as arising from the missing phantom hand. Is that clear? Okay. Wrong. The basic idea is correct, but there's a flaw in the argument. If you look at the diagram, the devil's in the details. What's the flaw? Okay, look at the diagram and listen carefully to what I'm saying. You remove the arm, no sensory input coming from the arm skin, so the hand area is devoid of sensory input, hungry for new sensory input. Touch the face input normally goes to the face area. Now noticing that this area is missing input, cross-innervates or invades this territory and starts activating hand neurons. So you feel the sensation in the hand when you touch on the face. Okay? Nothing wrong with that explanation, except for one fatal flaw. In all our patients, the map is here in the lower jaw, on the cheek, lower jaw, not on the forehead. But let's look at the diagram from Penfield. Every medical student learns this. It's found in hundreds of psychology textbooks. Every undergraduate psychologist learns it. Described by Wilder Penfield, the famous pioneering new neurosurgeons in Canada, mapping live human brains. Patients who do a craniotomy, remove a flap of skull, stimulate neurons and ask him, what do you feel? He says, oh, my thumb is tingling, index finger is tingling, and you map out the body surface and the surface of the brain, and he produced this famous diagram called the Penfield map of the brain, of the body and the brain, Penfield homunculus. My theory fits except for one problem. What is the problem? Let's look at it again. Map on the face. By the way, am I going too fast here? That's the map on the brain. Somebody here must have noticed this problem. Yeah.
The forehead is the closest to the fingers, right?
Exactly. The forehead, according to Penfield, the forehead is near the hand. So there's the inversion of this territory. It should go from the forehead to the hand. If you touch the forehead, you should feel sensations in the missing hand. But that's not what happens. It's here at the bottom of the face. So the devil's in the details. Most of the patients it's here. What's going on? When you rule out the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true, said Sherlock Holmes. So one of us is wrong. Either Penfield is wrong or I'm wrong. So I said, let's go and look at Penfield's research. I couldn't find any primary sources in old journals, 40, 50 years ago. It is in his book and it's found in every psychology textbook. So then I said, let's go and look at primary literature, and it's based on half a dozen points per patient in about half a dozen patients. Very small sample. And his artist colleague drew that diagram, and now it's become iconic of brain function. And I said, he got his head upside down. There's too far a number of samples. If you do it properly, the head will be the other way around. Because I trust my research, I spent half an hour and I trusted more. I said, okay. So then this guy was listening to me in the audience and he said, okay, I'm going to test this, doctor, because I'm doing this brain mapping right now in my lab, setting up my lab at Stanford. I'll tell you the answer in a week. Do you want to collaborate on this? You don't have to collaborate with me. Do it. Tell me what you find. A week later, a phone call comes and he says, Rama, you're right. The head is upside down in Penfield's map. So all the textbooks have been rewritten, all recalled and rewritten. Or every new, at least in the next edition, this head should be the other way around. Now I'm not telling you this because it's of deep theoretical interest. Who cares whether the head is upside down or right side up? I'm telling you this purely out of sadistic delight. But somebody can spend 5 minutes with a Q-tip and read out all the textbooks and dispute the work of a famous neurosurgeon and say he got it wrong. So that purpose is served. But in addition, there's a clinical utility, and what's that? Let me go and tell you about the clinical utility. Okay, here's some brain imaging which we did to show that's indeed what happens. So to confirm our theory, we go and do brain imaging, not just fishing expedition, which is what 90% of brain imaging is. We do it when necessary, to make a point. Okay, I'm going to go through this extremely quickly because we're running out of time. The mirror procedure for treating phantom pain. Many patients with phantoms experience. Let me backtrack. Okay, before I get to this, I will sequence the slide. I'm trying to decide what order is the best to do it, and given our time limits. Let's do the. Okay, let me mention this very briefly. Then we'll talk about the other things. Okay. So the guy says my arm is frozen in cement. It refuses to budge, and it's painful. A phantom is painful. What does that mean? There's no arm there. Some of them driven to suicide, severe depression. Then I realized when you look at the patient's case sheets, most of them had a pre-existing nerve damage and a paralysis of their arm, lying in a sling, and excruciatingly painful. And then, when you amputate the arm, that pain and paralysis of the arm gets carried over into the phantom. You get a phantom that's paralyzed. A normal person, if you amputate the arm, you get a phantom. The phantom can move, shake hands with you, pat you on your neck, as I said. But these 20-30% of patients, the phantom is immobilized, it's frozen, it's paralyzed. What do you mean by a paralyzed phantom limb? Oxymoron, there's no limb there. But that's what the patient experiences. But maybe the discrepancy between the visual input and the lack of feedback signals, discrepancy between the forward command sent to the arm and the lack of feedback signals is something to do with the pain. So on a hunch, I said, what if you make the patient see his phantom moving again when he issues a command? thereby restoring the consistency. Is that clear? Okay, if he doesn't have an arm and he tries to move it, there's no arm, he doesn't get any feedback. How do you get feedback from a missing arm? Virtual reality. So I contacted my colleagues at Caltech. They said, "Oh, sure, we can do this. It's not very effective, but in real time, it'll cost you about $400,000. I said, "Forget that." Then he said, "We can do it for $2. And that's when we came up with the mirror arrangement. Mirror box, which is not widely known. I won't describe it in detail. You put a mirror in front, parasagittal plane, right, like that. You have to imagine it. Okay, you got a mirror here. My left arm is a phantom, left side of the mirror. Right side of the mirror is a reflecting surface, and I put my right hand, the patient puts the right hand, looks inside the mirror, you see the reflection of the intact hand in the mirror. It's as though you've resurrected his phantom visually, optically. Is that clear? Now he sends symmetric commands to both hands. Clap, open, close the hand, fist. Clap, wave goodbye, conduct an orchestra. While looking in the mirror, he's going to get visual feedback that his left hand is back and is moving with impunity and obeying his command, complete, in one stroke. I said, "Do you want to try this, Derek?" And he said, but I can't move my phantom, my left side, I can move my right one, but I can't move my phantom. I just want you to try it anyway. Pretend it's ESP. He said, "Okay, I'll try it." Put the mirror there and looks inside the reflection. He said, I said, "Move, my God, it's he's jumping up and down like a kid." I said, "Calm down." He said, "My left arm, my phantom, is moving again. For the first time in 15 years, it's starting to move. My fingers, my wrist, everything." And I said, "Does it bother you?" He said, No, it feels wonderful. But previously I could not move it. Moving it seems to also produce relief from the cramping sensation. I said, "Okay, this is wonderful that this guy..." So I said, "Now close your eyes and do it." Oh, now my real hand is moving. My phantom refuses to budge. Frozen as before. Now open your hand. "Oh my God, it's moving again. It feels good." Okay. Then I said, "Okay, this supports my idea about learned paralysis. That when the arm was intact and the guy was sending a signal, getting visual signal saying it's not moving. Move, no, move, no." And this signal, sometimes is learned into the brain and is experienced as phantom pain, the discrepancy. And restoring the loop with the mirror restores the loop and thereby relieves phantom pain. But I've got this guy to move his phantom limb. I'm not going to get a prize for that. It's arcane academic observation. Getting a guy to move his phantom limb, right? No use to anybody. But I said, maybe other areas of neurology, paralysis from stroke, paralysis from RSD, I'll tell you about that in a minute, may benefit from this type of visual feedback treatment. First thing to do is, does it work in the long run? If you repeatedly practice with it for a few weeks, a few hours a day, then can you move it without dispense the mirror, move the hand without the mirror, the pain goes away. He feels, and the hand is moving, the pain is less. I said, "Take the mirror home, it's only $2, 1 hour a day, after 2 weeks, report back to me." Takes it home. After 10 days, he phones me a little prematurely. He says, "I've been trying this, it's wonderful when I have the mirror, it's moving and all that. But when I stop, close my eyes, it doesn't move. I know you want it to move again, but it does not move. Pain comes back." I said, "Okay, well, just return the mirror when you're here sometime, next week. Just bring it back. It's only $2, but the university is very fussy about it. Bring it back." So he said, "Okay, I'll do that," and all that. So then after about another week, he phoned me up and I said, what's going on? He's all agitated on the phone. He said, "Doctor, you're not going to believe this." I said, "What?" "It's gone." I said, "What's gone?" I thought the box was gone. "Where is it gone?" He said, No, the phantom is gone." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "This phantom I've had for the last 15 years has disappeared. And unfortunately, the box, you see, my phantom finger is still there, dangling from my shoulder. And the box, it doesn't reach the box. So can you change the design of the box, put it on my head, so I can get rid of the fingers?" Now, this is about 10 years ago, and the hand is still gone, completely gone, pain is gone in that patient. Now they've done double-blind, placebo-controlled study, New England Journal of Medicine. The paper with 30 patients, you can look it up. Tsao, T-S-A-O is the name of the guy. Dozens of studies showing that in a substantial fraction of patients, 2/3 of patients get phantom pain. Of those 2/3, let's say 100 patients, about a third of them, 1/3 of get spontaneously recover from pain after a year or two. But with the mirror procedure, the recovery is double that. So about 60% of patients recover instead of 30%. You may think that's not such a small number, only 30 out of 100, right? I'm being helped by the mirror. You're the patient, that's not a small number. Right? I mean, so there's something interesting going on here. Now it's used throughout the world, everywhere except in India. throughout the world they're using, because it's too cheap to use it here, you know. So they use it everywhere in the world, and it's being implemented and successfully in many patients, not in all patients, many patients, and you can do it at home. Second condition I'll tell you about is RSD. RSD is a strange condition, not widely diagnosed in India. It's a real condition, not a bogus one. Normally when you have a fracture in a metacarpal bone, a tiny fracture, hairline fracture, it gets inflamed, the inflammatory response, swollen, red, painful, immobilized, all of those changes, classic inflammation. To immobilize the finger to protect it from further injury. You don't want to use the hand till it heals, right? You get all these changes taking place in that classic inflammation. And after about a few weeks, the fracture heals, everything goes in reverse. Swelling goes away, pain goes away, warmth goes away, motility returns, normal. In 1 out of 50 people, that does not happen. The pain hangs around, becomes worse, paralysis becomes worse, finger becomes swollen, bigger, whole arm gets swollen from this metacarpal bone injury. Talk about mind-body medicine. The entire arm gets swollen, excruciatingly painful and paralyzed for life from this trivial injury. What do you do about it? You can do surgery, you can cut the spinal cord. People do this, cut the spinal cord. People live in agony with this syndrome. In some cases, we'll go and do even a thalamotomy, do neurosurgery. It usually doesn't work, and they've not done no placebo-controlled studies have been done on these procedures. Ganglionectomy, remove the sympathetic ganglia, helps in some cases, but no controlled studies have been done. Put the mirror there, ask him to move his normal hand, his reflection of the normal hand, namely what looks like his left hand, starts moving. Hand is no longer swollen, right? Because it's seeing reflection of the normal hand. It looks slim and not painful when he moves it, because it's not really moving. It's a reflection that's moving. Do it for 5 minutes and he says, my God, the pain's gone down. I'm able to move my hand again. At first it's not really moving. He thinks it's moving. He feels it moving. He looks at the other mirror and he starts crying sometimes. He says, oh, it's not really moving then. You keep doing it, okay. Then it really starts moving on the table. After about 15, 20 minutes, it starts moving. Temperature falls. You can fake the relief from pain. You can't fake temperature of the skin. Temperature drops to normal. The swelling subsides. From a mirror, think how radical this is. You're showing a mirror to a patient with a swollen arm, and the swelling subsides as the patient is watching it. This has been done in about the 20 double-blind control studies on this, 18 of them showing that you see clear changes, significant changes, clinically important significant changes. It's now accepted line of treatment, first line of treatment, in about 1/3 to 25% of clinics dealing with this problem in the United States or in the UK. Okay, so you can treat real pain in a real arm. Here's an example of, this is data, I'm going to skip that, just showing that, comparing with non-mirror placebo, a plate of glass, or imagery placebo. Just imagine it's moving again, something like that. None of that works. Here's an example of a normal hand, a little mosquito, not a mosquito, but a tiny little fracture leading to that condition for months and months, years and years. Another example of lower limb. This is again mental imagery group, active mirror group, covered mirror group. Okay, now let's go back to that patient. Well, okay, let's go back to another concept called mirror neurons. How many of you know about mirror neurons? Okay, just very briefly, two types of mirror neurons. One is the motor mirror neurons. That is, every time you move and grab something or push something or pull something, there's a motor command neuron that executes that action, that basically orchestrates that sequence of muscle twitches that results in that skilled action, grabbing something, pushing something, pulling something. Now, some of these neurons, which orchestrate this movement, will fire when Professor Swaminathan, I'm merely watching him moving. I'm not moving my hand. It's commanding my hand to move, that neuron. It fires when Swaminathan moves his hand. People immediately say this must be telepathy or something. No, nothing to do with telepathy. It's basically using the visual input, transforming it into a somatic sensation, body image. You incorporate it into your body image. The experience is the same movement. Very important, because that neuron is now, when it fires in my brain, when Professor Swaminathan is about to, if I do and reach a banana, the neuron fires. When Professor Swaminathan looks at a banana and is about to reach, the neuron fires. Neuron is predicting his action. His impending action is being created a model in your brain, a virtual reality model of your impending actions and intentions and thoughts. Mind reading neuron. These are called mirror neuron. Class 2 mirror neurons are found in the sensory areas of the brain, sensory cortex. If you touch me here, sensory neuron fires. Another neuron. There's a map of the body surface and surface of the brain, right? You already saw that, but it's actually a map behind it. I won't go into complexity. Yes, too. It turns out that some of those neurons, about 10% of those neurons, will fire when you poke my elbow. It fires. When you poke Dr. Swaminathan's elbow, that neuron will fire. Again, it's doing a virtual reality simulation thing. That visual input is transformed into an abstract representation in my brain, which is identical to, depending on whether you poke my elbow or your elbow, it doesn't care. It's called a mirror, monkey see, monkey do neuron, or mirror neuron for sensations. This is radical because it's the basis for empathy. I've argued before it's the basis for empathy. This is discovered by Rizzolatti in Parma in Italy. Basis for empathy because I empathize with him, because I know what he's going through. When the needle is poking him, I know what it's like. Same neuron is firing, that's why you know. But here's the question. If I poke Gopu or him with a needle, I feel my neurons, sensory mirror neurons are firing away, poking. I don't say, ow, and withdraw my hand. I don't feel the pain. Why not? Same neurons are firing. Anybody want to guess? Here's a set of neurons in my brain which will fire when somebody pokes me with a needle. There's a map of my body surface on the surface of that map. With every part of the body represented will fire simultaneously. If your own body's pain because somebody pokes it, or you watch somebody else being poked in the same location. Yet, if you watch somebody else, you don't literally feel it in your hand. Only if somebody pokes you, you feel it. How does the damn neuron know the difference? Anybody? Yeah.
So I think there's a sense of body boundary, me versus you. So this sense of boundary is what cuts me off from you physically.
That's very good. It's a very mystical way of stating it, but it's a correct answer. The answer is the skin of your own body is sending veto signals, saying I'm not being poked. It's sending a null signal. So the null signal vetoes the mirror neuron output, saying, okay, you're firing, but there's no signal coming in from the skin, so shut up. So you empathize with Dr. Swaminathan. You know what it's like, so empathize with him, but don't literally feel the pain, otherwise you get confused. You start dissolving into other people's minds. So you preserve your identity and autonomy and of sensations, at the same time you empathize with that person. How do you test this theory? Quick.
Cut out the visual.
But cut out the visual, he won't get any activity in the neuron. Because he has to see, I have to see him being poked.
Simultaneously do it.
That might work, but simply I just remove my arm. No input coming from my arm. I watch Dr. Swaminathan being poked. So I should feel the pain. Because there's no veto signal. Neuron fires, I should feel the pain. So if a phantom limb patient looks at somebody else being poked, he should feel the pain, literally. Simple prediction. Phantom limb has been studied for 1,000 years. Nobody made that prediction. I told this guy, can you watch me when I do this? He said, sure, I'll watch you. Have you ever noticed that you feel pain when somebody is poked? I notice it fluctuating all the time, so I can't make it. I think something like that I may have noticed, and I told my doctor, he said, don't worry about it, it's all mental. And of course, it's all mental. So I said, okay, I want you to watch. I said, what happened? You poked me in the wrist. You poked me. Very clear referred pain sensation from my hand to his hand. So think about the barrier between self and others has dissolved momentarily. So I experienced Dr. Swaminathan's sensations. So long as there's no skin inhibiting that normally which would inhibit that expression of that signal in my brain. So this supports my idea, but then so what? Remember the third part of my question, is it real? What's causing it? So what? Well, we said, okay, if this is true, if you had phantom pain, which he had, cramping pain like that, massage your wife. Ask somebody to massage your wife or your husband, whatever, right? You feel a phantom massage in your phantom. Will that relieve the phantom pain? He thought I was crazy. Let's just try it. He phoned the next morning and he said, I did that exactly as you said. I feel the phantom massage in my phantom hand, and it relieves the phantom pain. We're now doing double-blind control studies. It's not been done yet. Unlike the standard mirror procedure, if it works, there's an even simpler way of treating phantom pain, by simply watching Gopu or watching any one of you. Or you have an app. I shouldn't have said that. So you click and watch yourself massaging yourself, watch somebody else massaging your hand. You should feel relief from your hand. We go on about mirror neurons, but we don't have time, so I'm going to skip that. So it's an example of clinical research, but fundamental research too. Understanding mirror neurons is important, very important for understanding the division between self and others. Last 10 minutes of my talk, I'm going to tell you about the extraordinary phenomenon of calendars. I told you about calendars, right? Okay, so let's talk about calendars. Francis Galton was Charles Darwin's first cousin in the 19th century. He noticed some people in the audience in his classroom, quite rare. Every time they see a number, they see a color. 5 is red, 6 is blue, 7 is green. I'm not going to talk about this phenomenon today. It's there in all my books. It's called synesthesia. Every number is tinged with a particular color. It runs in families. What's going on? We more or less figured it out. When I say we, it's our group, as well as Jamie Ward's group in University College London, as well as Randy Blake in Northwestern, so several groups in parallel. But I think we were first. I'm not sure. But okay, so we proved this. First of all, how do you know the person is really seeing red with 2s and green with 5s? Somebody tells you how do you prove it. You can't just rely on a verbal report. So we designed this display. There are some 5s embedded in a matrix of 2s, correct? Or rather, it's 2s embedded in a matrix of 5s. Very hard to pull out. But when you pull them out finally, they form an upside-down triangle. Now, this sort claims that 5 is red and 2 is green. Would he see that upside-down triangle instantly? Whereas you and I have to scrutinize one by one and decide it's forming a triangle. The answer is yes. They say, oh, I see a triangle upside down. Much faster than you and me. This shows they're not crazy. They're not making it up. The standard theory of synesthesia in the old days was they're schizophrenics, or they're just crazy. He's crazy, how come he's better at it than us? Another theory of synesthesia, by the way, is that because it runs in families, as Galton showed, it's based on early childhood memories of refrigerator magnets. In the United States, and maybe even here, as children we learn magnets, with A, B, C, and they're all different colors, or even in books, A, B, C are different colors. Maybe the first thing he's exposed to is that, and he gets stuck with that color. So 5 is tinged with red, 6 is blue, 7 is green, and all that. This doesn't explain why all of us don't have synesthesia then. Why only them? Right. Secondly, why does it get transmitted across generations? You say same magnet is being passed down? So common sense, science is 90% of science is common sense. It seems very unlikely to us. So what's going on? Another theory is this is based on drug use. And sure enough, much more common in Berkeley than any other university. And this leads me to suspect there's some truth to this. Maybe in IIT, not here. Okay, but we don't know. We can check that. But that type of questionnaire doesn't get you very far. We want to nail it down precisely. Okay. So we said if you do this, they see it faster. Already we've shown it's a real phenomenon. Okay. Next question: what's going on in the brain? These are other experiments you don't have time to go into. What's going on in the brain? You go to the color area of the brain. The red splotch there. Oops, sorry. There's a color area of the brain. Do you all see it? Color area, and that's the number area. And the dots. Sorry, the other way around. The number area is the red outline, color area, the dots, right next to each other. Maybe some people are born with excess connections between these two. Every time they see a number, cross-activates the color, just like the hand and the face, cross-activation, number, color. But not due to amputation. Why? Because of defective pruning. This phenomenon runs in families, synesthesia. So that gave us a clue. Galton showed that it runs in families. In the fetus, everything is connected to everything. The brain is tremendous hyperconnectivity in the brain, in the fetus. And then you remove excessive connections to create the characteristic modular architecture of the adult brain. You get modularity. If the pruning fails, the pruning gene mutates, then you get excess connections throughout the brain. If in addition, that mutation is expressed selectively in the fusiform gyrus, there, you're going to get number color synesthesia. And that's exactly what we found. We went and looked at brain, we had to do brain imaging, there's no other way. We did brain imaging and we found that there's excess connections there. This area, color area, lights up when you show black and white numbers in these synestheses. Normal people, only the number area lights up. The color area does not light up. So what? Next question, right? It's sideline if you want to look at it just for fun, right? Okay. 90% of what we do is just for fun, but sometimes we stumble on interesting things. So this is an example of synesthesia. Okay, first of all, what do all of you see here? Anybody see what it is? Raise your hands.
No sex causes bad eyes.
Oh, who's that? There's a genius here. Who said that? You've seen it before? Have you seen it before?
No, I'm sitting in the end, so it's easy.
Okay, good, excellent. So for all of you, the rest of you unfortunate people, Just squint your eyes like this. Squint your eyes. Make it all blurred. Suddenly you start reading it, correct? What? People start reading it, yes? Okay, anyway, what's going on here is the information conveyed by low spatial frequencies in the Fourier space, the numbers. The high spatial frequencies, the lines, mask the low spatial frequencies, so you don't see it normally. But you blur your eyes to eliminate the interfering contours, then instantly you see the letters of the alphabet. Why am I mentioning you should give this to a synesthete? The synesthete patient says, you know, that looks like a red and a green and a blue and a yellow and a red again and a blue again. But I don't know why they're colored. I don't see any numbers. Where does that happen? Because in him, the cross activation is taking place earlier than the conscious recognition of numbers. So the color is activated en route, independent of conscious recognition of the numbers, which occurs later. So even without conscious recognition, the number grapheme is evoking the corresponding color, allowing him to deduce what the color is even before he sees them consciously. Right, okay. Now let's come to the, okay, that's another example of a brain image showing color area, number area right next to each other, cross-wired. Now why would they be cross-wired? Because the excess connections, these are pruned away. In some people they're not pruned away, you get cross-wiring. Why is it important? It turns out synesthesia is 8 times more common among artists, poets, novelists than in the general population. Why? What do artists, poets, and novelists have in common? Which, for example, engineers, the incidence is low of synesthesia. Sorry? Crazy. Creativity, yeah, both, yeah. Some people say crazy, but let's set that aside. What they have in common is the ability to engage in metaphorical thinking, analogy and metaphor. It is the yeast and Juliet is the sun, you say. Yeast and Juliet is the sun. Why are you blinking some direction with Juliet, the beautiful woman? What's the connection? Your brain says, no, it doesn't mean it's a glowing ball of fire. Schizophrenics do that. They don't get the true meaning of the analogy or metaphor. They latch on to the literal meaning. So they're very bad at metaphor, but it's another story there. Going back to synesthetes, what normal people do when they're creative is link seemingly unrelated ideas. Like it is the yeast and Juliet is the sun. Juliet and the sun both warm. She's warm like the sun. She's radiant like the sun. She illuminates the cosmos like the sun. She gets up in the bed like the sun rises in the east. She's the center of my solar system like the sun is the center of the solar system. I mean, you can go on like that. Shakespeare was a master. What I'm claiming is the reason this gene survived, first of all, you ask, when biologists ask, why do 1 out of 10, 1 out of 60 people have a gene that makes you see colored numbers? It doesn't make any sense. The hidden agenda is it makes a subset of the population more creative, capable of linking seemingly unrelated ideas, which is the basis of creativity. That's why the synesthesia gene was conserved and still present in the population, substantial number of the population. And that's why it's not been, you haven't got rid of the gene, it's not a useless gene. Its side effect is it makes you more creative. Now immediately people jump on me and say, well, then why don't everybody have it? If the synesthesia gene is so good, why are we not all synesthesia? Make it all creative. That's a stupid question because in biology, you don't always get perfection because you need time. Give it another 500,000 years, maybe you'll all have synesthesia. Secondly, you also need heterogeneity in the gene pool. You don't want everybody being creative. If the neurosurgeon doing surgery on your brain, you don't want him getting metaphorical and creative on you. You don't want a poet working on your brain, take my word for it. Okay, so you need different types. So this is why you get this heterogeneity in the population. Okay, so this is very interesting. We've gone from the gene, people are now cloned the gene in a large family, to the psychophysics, the perceptual experiments showing there's a real phenomenon, it's not fake, they're not making it up. Going to the physiology, area V4, color area, number area in the brain, all the way to Shakespeare, creativity, evolution, all of that. In one joke, a guy saying, I see 5 is red. And people think they're crazy. By following that up, we'll be able to show all this. That's the exciting thing about this field. Last point I want to make is Galton himself made another observation. Some people will have a peculiar condition called number form or calendar form. When they ask to visualize the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, when you visualize the numbers, you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Left to right, Gopu, Swaminathan. Left to right, or right to left, depending on your ethnic background, right? Normally left to right. These people will say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 17, 18, 19, 20, 106, 106. Elaborate twisted line in front of them. What do you make of it? No wonder people thought they were crazy. Or they have calendars which are colored, or calendars which have spatial characteristics. Monday, January, February, March, April. January is green, February is blue, March is chartreuse. Okay. Nuts. What else? January is here. When I ask one of you to explain where January is here, February, March, April, you have a grid. Somebody has told me that, right? You did. 99% of people see a rectangular grid in front of you. January top left, December bottom right. Right? Most common. But some people see a hula hoop, L shape, U shape, all sorts of strange shapes, and they can literally, they claim they can see the letters, see the graphemes, January, J-A-N-U, are printed in front of them. Now, how do you prove this experimentally? As an experimental scientist, what do you do? The Newton's experiment, where is it? The upside down prism, that's what you need. So people are doing brain imaging to no avail because it's very complicated area, a bunch of areas there, to find out where you sort of represent the squiggle in the brain. It's horrendous. We just said, look, buddy, I want you to read the numbers, read the months of a calendar. I'm going to give you a month of the calendar, randomly chosen. I want to recite backwards, alternate months. Supposing I said October. Go backwards, skipping 1 month at a time.
August. June. March. January.
It took him quite a while. Now do it forward. Let's just recite from February to October. Recite. Now this guy has a representation, a visual representation. He can read it backwards and forwards with equal speed. He's doing it with an algorithm, and it can't do it backwards. This asymmetry and the increase in speed when you present it to a synesthete shows it's a real phenomenon. You can't fake that. We've seen dozens of synesthetes now. They all backward reading is just as fast as forward reading. You don't need brain imaging to show that. You need 5 minutes and a piece of paper. Another thing that gave us a clue, we always record these sessions. And then we ask him to visualize the calendar, read it off, right? What happens when you record and watch his image later? When you ask him to recite it, you see his eyes move. He doesn't know you're recording him. Why is he looking to when you say January, all of us do January top left, bottom right, December. He goes to his eyes are you, tracking the numbers, backwards. So it's another casual observation that proves the point that they're not faking this. Another even more interesting observation. You said what you did in February. You sort of consult your calendar and you said I did something in February. It's not the rote memorization. You actually, people report visualizing and revisiting those tender moments, nostalgic reminiscence of episodes from your life. What you call your life, your mental life, nothing but a series of memories and anticipated actions. What we call episodic memory. Strung like pearls on the thread of your tenuous thread of your existence, right? So this you call human life. Now I ask you about February. What do these guys do? You ask them turn to the right. The astonishing thing is the calendar remains here. The calendar remains here, and the left side of the calendar becomes fuzzy and invisible. But there's no real calendar. It's all in their head. What calendar? There's no calendar there. The real calendar, if you look to the right, obviously left side will become fuzzy, right? But with the mental calendar, why should it become fuzzy? I said, tell me what happened there on February 16th. I don't know. Okay, now look to the left. Now it becomes clear and it explains what happened. And the events on the right side become unclear. So instead of being represented in some abstract form in your brain, which is what most people think of memory, it's being represented spatially. All of you are like dogs, marking, territorial marking with urine. You're doing it in your brain. You've got this map of the world. You place cells in the hippocampus. The guys got the Nobel Prize 5 years ago, discovering cells in the hippocampus. You record this place where you are in the map in a rat's brain. You put electrodes in the rat's hippocampus. I'm standing here. I know roughly where I'm facing. I'm now not in Hyderabad anymore. I'm in Chennai. I'm near Gindi. I'm near IIT. I went to the gate. I got lost. Sort of came here. I know roughly where I am. Morning I get up. I get my bearings. First thing I do is, where am I? Who am I? In a fraction of a second, I get my bearings. If I'm visiting Paris and I get up in the hotel, momentarily I'm bewildered. What the hell what's going on? It takes 10 seconds for me to read and say, well, of course, this is a conference. That's what I am. Does that happen to all of you? Just me. All of you, right? So first thing you do is, now, if a neurologist checking for dementia, first thing you ask the patient is what? First thing. Where are you? Second thing. What time is it? Yeah, who to, but before that, what time is it? First signs of dementia is lack of ability to localize yourself in time and anchor yourself in space and time. Even though we take it for granted, it's the axiomatic foundation of your life. That's being mediated by these cells in the hippocampus. In addition, okay, next question is, where is this? We've showed the phenomenon is real. We've done 2 experiments. How real is real? Okay, this gets complicated, but I'll mention it briefly. If you take a normal person and I show you a vertical test tube or a circle, let's take a test tube, an outline of a test tube. And I ask you to visualize the outline, not visualize, I draw the outline of a test tube, it looks normal, right? Obviously, you've drawn it. You then put it in a background of tilted lines, to high contrast tilted grating. What do you see? Anybody? You draw a vertical line against the background of tilted high contrast lines. The line tilts in the opposite direction. Well-known contrast illusion discovered 100 years ago. Psychology books are full of this, called visual contrast orientation. Okay, so far so good. Now what if you project your calendar on tilted lines? It's in your brain, it's not there in the visual image. They said, doctor, the calendar looks tilted, opposite direction. Or you put the vertical lines on a grating, he gets moire interference pattern. You know what moire patterns are? Moire patterns from your mental image interacting with the real physical image. Not 2 physical images, which is a normal moire pattern, but your mental image with the moire pattern. This is radical, because most of us are taught in the brain there's no physical representation of external reality. There's an abstract equation that's going on in your brain. There's a mathematician sitting there punching away numbers. It's like a computer. Bullshit. That's not what's going on. It's creating almost a picture-like representation. Why it does that, we don't know. Maybe it's the easy way to solve problems in the real world. Quick and dirty way of solving problems. That's what the brain is about. It's about solving the problem quickly, using dirty tricks and heuristics, leading babies often enough to survive in the next generation. The goal is not optimality, unlike engineering, AI, and all that. The goal is adequacy. Adequate to lead as many babies as you can. Not to be optimal. That's a human ailment. Right? So that's the bottom line. Okay, so now we've talked about number line. The question is, where is it going on in the brain? Okay, last point of my lecture. Where is this in the brain? Well, it turns out, I was looking at atlases, there is a band of fibers going from the angular gyrus in the left hemisphere. Angular gyrus sits at the crossroads between frontal, parietal, and occipital lobe, strategically located to combine some information from touch, hearing, and vision. And it's involved in creating intermodality interactions, vital for consciousness and intelligence. It turns out if it's damaged, you get Grossman syndrome. Every neurology student knows this. Which is, he can no longer multiply or divide simple numbers. Here's a very eminent math professor I saw recently. Damage to left angular gyrus. What is 17 minus 3? 17 minus 3? 17 minus 3 is about, I think it's about 12. Are you sure that I'm sure it's 12? Everything else is fine. When you talk about division or separation, you can't use multiplication. I'll tell you why. You can't use why is that? You can still multiply. Why is that? Because you learn it by rote. There's no calculation involved as a child, so he just rattles it out. Whereas the subtraction and division requires some computation, juggling of numbers, he can't do that. He doesn't know left from right. Sequence he's bad at. What day of the week did you have? When did you go to your Suprabhatam? Did you listen to Suprabhatam? When did you listen to Samagudi concert? I don't remember. Or he'll give you some random answer. He'll remember the events, but not the sequence. All of us connect the two. You can do both. These guys cannot remember the sequence properly. So that's only we're studying here in Chennai. So you got sequence, left, right, spelling the bad. What is this condition where they're bad at spelling and have problem with sequence and problem with, what is this condition? Sorry? Dyslexia, exactly. So they'll say Rama, Amar, A-M-A-R, they'll write for Rama. Or predict, they'll put predict. The sequence is messed up. Sine qua non, the characteristic finding in dyslexia. So we're thinking now that this area in the brain, the left angular gyrus, is involved in representing, it's a sequence detecting module in the brain. specialized only for that role, manifesting in different abilities like arithmetic and calendar. From that, there's a band of fibers you can actually trace by diffusion tensor imaging, which goes to the, it's called the inferior longitudinal fasciculus. Goes a band of fibers, physical fibers, which goes down, synapses with hippocampal neurons, place neurons, and grid cells, which won the Nobel Prize 5 years ago, so involved in things like rat opens his eyes in the morning. Where am I? I'm in the stupid lab with this, surrounded by this, crazy people, and we get my cheese soon. Where am I? Which direction am I facing? All that is encoded in that one neuron. If you go somewhere else, then another neuron will fire. Hippocampal place cells. Grid cells are like the GPS system in your brain. So your GPS system, putting it very crudely, is not exactly like a GPS system, but putting it crudely, GPS system, located in the hippocampus, is directly connected to the sequence detecting mechanism in the angular gyrus. What do you have? You have your calendar. Calendar you think is something unimportant, not very, especially here in India, you just don't pay much attention to it. But in fact, vital. When you get up, first thing in the morning, you anchor yourself. Throughout the week, throughout the day, you're constantly planning the sequence of events in your life. You're revisiting moments in your life in the past in proper sequence, episodic memories. So an important aspect of you being a human being is your calendar. That we think we've nailed down. That's where it is in the brain. And I bet calendar synesthetes, you're going to get much more hyperconnectivity between these two regions than in the general population. So just give you lots of ideas to think about, not really about how to do science, but I mentioned that briefly in the early part of the lecture. But all these experiments, you don't need complicated equipment. So I gave a lecture at Delhi University just a couple of days ago. You don't need complicated equipment to do good science. You can just use Q-tips, you can use prisms, whatever you want. And you can ask the right one. Especially here in India, the opportunities to work with patients is astonishingly obvious. So it's a gold mine. And my colleague and friend, Dr. A.V. Srinivasan, I should have mentioned, was also a collaborator in some of this research locally. Thank you very much. Yeah, sure.
If we have time he'll take a few questions, so another 5 to 10 minutes, that might take about longer. Could you people in the back come up in front, please?
No, I'll get the mic.
We'll get the mic.
Just some water. Some water. Oh, thank you.
Next.
Hi. So, when we're talking about phantom pain for a limb, which is a visual connect for us, but can a phantom pain also exist for if somebody's gallbladder is removed?
Can phantom pain exist for what?
When the gallbladder is removed, which is an internal organ.
Oh, I see, yes. Yeah, you can get phantom for internal organs. For example, appendix is removed. The characteristic pain of appendicitis, the spasmodic pain, comes in waves of excruciating pain, the lower right quadrant. When you hear a patient saying that he had a pain that started in the umbilical region, near the belly button, and the pain then migrated to the lower right quadrant, and there's vomiting, there's fever, you can be quite sure you're dealing with appendicitis, even without any confirmation. Reasonably sure, not 100% sure. Now you go in and remove the appendix. Same spasmodic pain persists for days or weeks, even though you remove the appendix. The patient then worries, has the appendix really been removed? So if you get pain for phantom appendix, you can get a phantom uterus after removing the uterus for carcinoma, for example. You can get phantom menstrual cramps. Somebody once asked me to get phantom PMS. I don't know the answer to that. You had a question.
Yes.
So I was wondering, thank you for the wonderful talk. I was wondering about the student who came to you saying that she felt when you tapped your head that her head was being tapped. Was it the same situation with the mirror neurons? And could it be?
That's a very good question. I meant to mention that the very first case which I mentioned, where I feel Dr. Swaminathan's touch sensations, the girl feels whatever I'm doing, that's an example, a congenital version of the same disease I described, syndrome that I described with the amputees. When you amputate my arm and I see him being touched, I feel it in my phantom arm. You do a massage his arm, then I feel a phantom massage which relieves my pain. I think in these people congenitally, the input veto signal is missing. Or some circuitry is messed up in the frontal lobes, which causes the sensation to be literally felt. By the way, that lady, it's an amusing thing with her is that if I tickle myself, she would go into hysterics laughing. She couldn't stop laughing. It's especially interesting because normal people can't tickle themselves. No, but you can all try it now. You can't tickle yourself. Yeah, amazing. Somebody else comes to do it, you should start laughing like crazy, but you try yourself, you can't do it. Because there's feed-forward signals in the brain, anticipating, then that removes the sense of laughter or tickle. You have to have unexpected, it has to have the unexpected quality. Somebody else can tickle you, of course, but you can't tickle yourself. But this lady, if I tickle myself, then she would laugh. Because she felt the rhythmic stimulation, started giggling uncontrollably. So we call it the name of the paper is interpersonal gargalesthesia. They just thought it sounds fancy and impressive, you know. It simply means that you watch somebody being tickled, you feel like laughing, you can't stop laughing. And there's a whole theory we have about evolution of humor and tickling and all that. We won't go into that.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, sir, one minute.
Thanks a lot for coming and addressing us here. My question is related to consciousness. We've heard about spiritualists and religious people all the time talking of consciousness. But now I also understand that scientists, especially quantum physicists, are also increasingly using the word consciousness. And I just wanted to understand from you as a neuroscientist, where does consciousness come into your research? Is there some kind of a consciousness center in the brain?
I don't think so, but I think you're raising very important questions, but these have been debated for 3 millennia. When Svatiketu, Yajnavalkya, Aristotle, Descartes, Kant, our own Vedantic philosophers, Shankara, and there's no answer. Stuart Sutherland said, consciousness is a topic about which a great deal has been written, but nothing is known. But that's a cop-out answer. I think that progress is being made because it's not true that everything that happens in the brain is conscious. Only a subset of neurons, when they're active, you're conscious. Other brain regions may be active and you may be completely unconscious. So there's some activity of some parts of the neuron, of the brain, that is associated strongly with being conscious. Why? Why only one of those neurons? What is special about that circuitry that makes it emerge into the surface of consciousness, whereas the rest of the brain can be active and you can be completely unconscious? Like, a friend of mine was driving me here the other day. We were having a conversation, lively, animated conversation with me. Somebody asked him, did you see that donkey cart pulling something on the way? He said, no, I didn't see it. Completely unconscious of everything around you, but you're driving, negotiating traffic, doing all that sophisticated computation when you're driving the street, negotiating traffic, avoiding pavements, avoiding the car with the bullock cart, right? You're avoiding all that, concentrating on the being conscious of the conversation, but doing all this without consciousness, sophisticated computation. But you cannot do the opposite. I cannot have a blind, unconscious conversation with him, being fully conscious of the I mean, this is almost impossible, right? So this is already telling you something. It's telling you that the conscious use of use of language, exchange of ideas requires consciousness, but driving does not. So there's some styles of computation associated with consciousness. What might they be? That's the question. That's what we're trying to understand. Nobody really has a clear answer to that.
So, sir, I read an article 1 month ago that this modern biotech genetic engineers, they said in future will create Virat Kohli or any celebrity, with genetic engineering. Is it possible? And then 2, is it possible from hair and ash to create a DNA and find out the identity of the person?
There are again big philosophical questions about whether you preserve the DNA and clone. But forget about ash and all that. If you clone somebody...
They said Subhash Chandra Bose, from his ash, they found out his identity and geography.
Well, okay, so several questions now. So I'm missing the sequence. What was the question about identity? If you create a replica, will the replica be conscious? Of course it will be conscious.
We can create Virat Kohli or anybody in 5 years.
I'm talking about theoretical. Let's say it takes 1 year. Forget about 5 years. Let's say 1 year they create a replica of you. Is that replica conscious? And is it you? That's a question. And I don't see why not. Identical twins are conscious, right? So I already have this experiment has been done. You have what's called an identical twin. It's a replica and it's fully conscious, just like you. But if I poke you with a needle, he won't feel the pain, obviously. So it's a different. You're both conscious independently. Now, whether you need a machine make made of some other structure, like instead of biological structures, use silicon as a base or something like that. But that can be equally conscious. Nobody knows what consciousness is, so I can't answer that question.
I think his question is, if they clone you, will the clone have your personality or an independent personality?
If they clone me with all my memories and all my acquired memories and my genetic inherited propensities, then it'll behave exactly like me, or more or less like me. Other than there's also noise in the system, of course. So it's not a deterministic system, so it'll be slightly different. But other than that, it'll be very similar. It'll claim it's not. It'll claim that I'm independent.
Mental mapping, is there an inbuilt sequence with a direction? Remembering things in one direction is natural. Remembering things, memorizing it backwards is difficult. Is there something like that?
You're asking the number that remembered in sequence.
Remembrance. So how does my mind remember, take in a sequence of things? I am ready to reproduce a certain sequence like that.
Yeah, good question.
That part is difficult.
Yeah, we don't exactly we roughly know the angular gyrus is involved. One of the structures involved. Exactly what the neurons are doing to compute the sequence, we don't know yet. It's trying to find out. It's a good question.
Inbuilt sense of direction in which you map everything.
Right. No, that's a good question. Question of directionality.
Thanks for the wonderful talk, Doctor.
Thank you.
My question is connected with the gentleman's question here about consciousness. I've read all your books and I've understood that the brain perceives the outside world and reconstructs it and extrapolates it. It's very good at that. So that's why we get the sense of reality and we build it. And since all of us have evolved together, both of us perceive the same thing as the exact thing. Now, my question is very simple. Is consciousness a byproduct of evolution? Is it something, Elon Musk is also talking about, that we are mere, hallucinations? Are we hallucinations, imagining and trying to make sense about hallucinations? Any thoughts about this?
I think there are several questions there. Can you just tell me the basic?
No, I'm just asking you whether the evolution has created consciousness as a byproduct.
Good. That's a straightforward question. I don't think so. I don't think it's a byproduct, because you find that if it's just a byproduct, it should be take vision. Red, green, yellow, and blue are examples of qualia, conscious awareness. They're very distinct. Each has its own specific qualia or sensory feel to it. Red is red, and yellow is yellow, and blue is blue. And it's chopped up. The wavelength is continuous wavelength of light, but it's chopped up into clear yellow, green, blue, red, which are immiscible, like oil and water. On the other hand, sound, pitch, instead of wavelength of light, if you use pitch is continuous. You don't have four categories: red, green, blue, yellow. It's continuous. Temperature is continuous, right? If you have agitation of molecules, kinetic energy of water, you warm it, make it hotter and hotter. It's continuously changing. It doesn't change. There's no phase transitions like red, green, blue, yellow. If it's just a byproduct, why do we have these rules that some sensations are chopped up, some sensations it doesn't get chopped up? It's continuous. There's some internal logic to it which makes evolutionary sense in the light of evolution, but we don't know what it is. So I think it's a product of evolution, all right, but that's not saying very much, right? I just think it's a product of evolution. Having said that, there are clearly some mysteries there. We don't quite know how human consciousness evolved, why it evolved. If it doesn't have a causal function, how can it have evolved from it and yet have causal function on the physical world? So my gut feeling is that it's a bit like, it's going to turn out to be like either a question like one posed by Hawking, which is, what is north of the North Pole? It's a meaningless question. I mean, you can't, it sounds very clever, but the question doesn't mean anything. What is north? The phrase doesn't apply anymore to the North Pole, right? The question, what is north of the North Pole? Similarly, is mind a product of the brain? Maybe that class of question, but that's just a promissory note. We don't know if it's true. That's one possibility. Or another analogy I can think of is, I'm trying to find a proper analogy of the relationship to consciousness. Maybe it's two ways of looking at the same problem, like wavelength and quantum nature of light. Two ways of describing the same thing. So descriptions of qualia are one style of describing the world, and using physics and chemistry and biology is another description. These are not incompatible descriptions. In some final theory of the cosmos, you encompass both and explain both, which you don't have yet. But that's called promissory materialism. Because we don't, I'm just making that up. We don't have enough data to show that's true. Maybe it'd be fundamentally that there are two aspects to nature, mind and matter, and you can never explain one in terms of the other. They're just two ways of looking at the world. Maybe something like that. But I'm just completely ignorant of this, as most of my colleagues are. Nobody really knows the answer to this. You had a question for me, Another?
Good evening, Doctor. Good evening, Doctor. This is.
Where are you? Oh, there you are. Okay.
Thanks for the wonderful lecture. I've read most of your books, and I've always been fascinated by this mirror neurons. So I'm still stuck on the first patient which you described. So you spoke about how you tried to tell her you're putting your hand in boiling water, but she could feel only the wetness.
Correct.
But if she was getting her visual cues from you, she must have really felt the heat and not the wetness, right? How did she realize that it was not the heat that you're feeling, although all your reactions indicated that you had put your hand in hot water?
Because it's not necessarily a logical system, it's a statistical system. Because it says the brain's has mirror neurons for touch. But every time I see somebody, I see Gopu touching me here, I feel touch sensations. And then every time I see an image of a finger being touched, I feel touch sensations. So the fact that the image is coming from there doesn't bother the brain. It says the finger is going near the skin, it's touching, so I'll feel touch. The fact that it's coming from there instead of my own skin doesn't bother the brain. That's why you get this you-me confusion. You feel the other person's in it. But with heat, how often do you see somebody putting his hand in boiling water? Almost never, very rarely. So that link was not established. So therefore, you don't have mirror neurons for heat. You only have it for touch, common sensations like touch. That's one cop out. Why you feel for giggling? That's a good question. You don't see people getting tickled all the time. But you do feel interpersonal tickling sensations.
According to Penrose's diagram of the correlation between the brain and the sensory input for body parts, if a person's leg were to be amputated, would the sensory input be remapped to the arm?
No, it gets remapped in the genitals. Because the foot is right next to the genitals in the map. So if you amputate the foot, if you stimulate the genitals, the patient feels sensations in his phantom foot. Sometimes he's felt as pain, sometimes pleasurable sensations get felt when the genitals are stimulated. They felt not just in the genitals, like most of us unfortunate people, but actually felt in the leg as well, the missing phantom leg. And if the entire leg has been removed, the orgasm spreads to involve the entire phantom leg. So it's much bigger and better than it was, to quote the patient,
Beautiful lecture. I just have one question which is connected with what you were saying about creativity and the size of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, Albert Einstein is supposed to have had a brain which was 1,200, somewhere I read 1,200 and odd grams. 1,200 odd grams, whereas 17% more than that of an average brain.
It's higher than that, but fine, yeah. But your point is taken, so you had more neurons, yeah.
My question is, does the size of the brain have anything to do with, it looks as though there is a correlation. Thomas Harvey had dissected the brain into 40 parts and then did a lot of experiments.
Short answer is...
For 40 years he had kept them with himself without telling people. Something about that, about Einstein's brain, if you could...
Right. The short answer is, it's not the size that's important, but how you use it.
We have last two questions.
Thank you very much for a lovely talk. I have a question about the connections that you mentioned between the color and the number area in the brain. Do you see some sort of connection in bipolar patients? Has that been studied versus schizophrenic? Are they similar kind of connections? And
what are the two you mentioned just now?
Bipolar.
Yes.
And schizophrenic patients.
Oh, I see.
Is there a connection between those two? And do you think there is some way we could use it in a clinical setup, like as a therapy?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's a good question. If you get, you're talking about schizophrenia and bipolar. It's not something I study. and can speculate on intelligently, but it is used in the clinic for other purposes. For example, OCD. OCD, everybody knows about OCD, where a person has this obsession to clean his hand. One manifestation of this is obsession. Touch a doorknob, they have to go and clean their hands for half an hour, rubbing it with soap and antiseptic and all that. And it becomes a tremendous impediment to their lifestyle. So, somebody shakes hands with them, they have to spend the next half an hour in the bathroom washing their hand. Going out is an ordeal. Interacting with people is an ordeal. So one of my students said, why not just, Jalan Bilal, he and I were wondering about this. We said, why not, if he feels the urge to wash his hand, he's touched something, why not he watch Swaminathan wash his hand? So same neuron will be activated. Maybe he'll feel the vicarious relief from watching Swaminathan washing his hand. Now, I don't want to use him all the time. Just have an app on your phone of him, or maybe you and yourself, washing your hand. Every time you feel the urge, just click, look at the app. The same neurons will be firing, suppress the urge to do it, so you don't have to excoriate your skin. Skin becomes inflamed and ripped up, sometimes bruised. And the psychological tension is unbearable of wanting to wash your hand. All this can be relieved maybe by watching, and this is something we're doing at Harvard and in Cambridge in a clinical trial. We don't know if it'll work on. So that's just work in progress. We don't know if it's going to work or not. That's an example of a clinical application.
Thanks for the talk, Professor.
Sure.
The question I had was a bit hypothetical. How would the number, color, synesthesia have manifested before the advent of writing? So an extension is...
Good question, yeah.
What was... Yeah, so yeah, how would it have manifested before people knew about writing?
Yeah, no, it's very important. When I say synesthesia is a genetic propensity, it's not acquired, it's not something due to drugs and all that. I mean that the propensity to link arbitrary shapes with colors is genetic. Not which particular shape is linked with which particular color. Synesthesia. What's that? Okay, so not the particular shape that's chosen for a particular color. Obviously not, because you don't learn numbers till you're 7 or 8 or 9 or earlier. You're not born with numbers, so you cannot connect them before birth, right? So basically, that shows that the particular associations are established later through exposure. Only the propensity to connect them is genetic. So in these people, what will happen is elementary shapes like triangles and squares and circles may have specific colors because they don't have alphabet. Or calendars maybe have colors. But so see what I'm saying? But if you have somebody with no symbols at all, that person cannot have synesthesia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that was a delightful 2 hours. I thank. Okay. Hello. That's a wonderful 2 hours. I think very generous 15 minutes of a question and answer session also. I'd like to thank Dr. Ramachandran not only for this lecture, but being the inspiration for Tamil Heritage Trust and indirectly Varahamira Science Forum. I'd like to invite Professor Swaminathan, who more fitting than to give him a small token of our appreciation. And we'll be clearing this. We have 20 minutes or 15 minutes over time, so we'll be clearing the hall in a couple of minutes. If you have any more conversations, you'll have to carry it on outside.
இதில் என்ன சொல்கிறதுக்குன்னு இல்லை, நிஜமாகவே நம்மளை நிறைய பேர் இவரோட புஸ்தகத்தெல்லாம் படிச்சிருக்கோம். நம்ம படிக்கும்போது ஒரு அப்ட்ராக்டாக தான் என்னை பொறுத்தளவில் சொல்கிறேன். இன்றைக்கி நிறைய இடத்துல நிறைய விஷயங்கள் அவர் சொன்னது இன்றைக்கி தான் நல்லா புரிஞ்சது. ஏன்னா எனக்கு ரொம்ப சந்தோஷமாக இருக்குது. He comes here every year. I think all of you will request him to give a talk every time.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir. We should get our society active.
I just want to correct one thing. He came, I was introduced to him. He attended one of my talks along with Sita Raman in Roja Muthiah Library. Then I invited him to talk to a few friends of ours. So it happened in the Sitaram's house,
Right.
opposite this one, Takar Baba. A number of people came. Right at that time, we thought that we must have a group, and we are here, and he is also with us. Thank you very much. In fact, he is very keen. I mean, this is a very august audience. He is very keen that we must have something like an Asiatic society in Chennai. Let us try to
Absolutely.
work out something like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No. Can I just make a remark?
Yes.
I just want one more remark just before you guys leave. I've been coming here for the last 7 or 8 years and met with Dr. Swaminathan and his colleagues, Gopu and others, and we have a wonderful opportunity to recreate the Asiatic Society of Bengal, where various famous British and Indian scientists and scholars discovered, quote unquote, discovered Sanskrit and its affinity to Greek and Latin, and archaeology, underwater exploration, reality or not reality of myths like Ramayana and all that. And we could talk about another 2 or 3 hours for this, but the general idea is we need your support for seriously starting a foundation concerned with ancient Indian history without being tainted by any political objectives. We should neither be affected by it one way or the other, but objectively studying the true facts of ancient civilization like ours. So we need what? We need lectures, we need more people interested, we need money, we need exploration, we need passion, most important, and interest.
And we may get together often.
And get together often, exactly.
By the way, the Tamil Heritage Trust membership கிடையாது, எல்லாரும் member. ஒரு சந்தா கிடையாது, ஒன்றும் கிடையாது. Only our intentions to be together to explore our life. Thank you.